I'm really, really excited about today's presentation from Gorongosa. Like others said, I've never been to Mozambique, but I've been tracking Gorongosa and that project for a long time. And I think we're going to hear the results of a very, very good integrated conservation enterprise and development program. I don't want to waste any time as I think we'll probably get a few more people coming in. But we have a great presentation and every minute counts. So can we go to the next slide, please? This is our theory of change for conservation enterprises. And I just pointed out to remind folks, I'm not going to read through it, but we have a learning agenda for answering questions around if we support conservation enterprises, will that actually achieve biodiversity conservation? And I think our speakers today are going to highlight points of their program that hit on each one of these questions and each one of these outcomes that are a fundamental part of our theory of change. So I hope you can keep that in mind as you listen to the presentation. If we can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to kick it off by introducing Nathan Sage, who is the acting Deputy Director for the Agriculture, Environment, and Business Office at USAID Mozambique, and he held the same position at USAID Bangladesh and has over 25 years of experience working throughout Africa and Asia. And he's going to introduce the speakers from Gorongosa today, as I believe you are the AOR for that program. So Nathan, over to you.
Yes, thanks Megan, and hi everybody, thanks for joining us today. I think that the speaker notes that I had when we went to the full audience may have disappeared. So I'm gonna, unfortunately I have to kind of run this off of memory a bit. But today we have the dream team from Gorongosa and the Gorongosa Project. We have Matt Jordan, who is the Director for Sustainable Development at the Gorongosa National Park. Matt's been working out there for the past 6 years and is working kind of half sort of in between Gorongosa and also working remotely out of Idaho, while he's also completing a master's in business degree at the University of Cape Town. Prior to this, he did 2 years of service with the Peace Corps here in Mozambique. And if the internet is as good in Idaho as it is here in Mozambique, we'll have a really good presentation from him. We're also joined by Neela Menjata, who's the livelihoods manager at Gorongosa National Park. And she's really savvy, and I've had the pleasure of working with her now for nearly a year. And she's responsible for introducing and managing innovative solutions that provide alternative livelihood and sources of income to people living around the park, of which there are probably about 200,000 or so. She's a statistician by training. She has a master's degree in sociology, and she's also worked for 5 years with the Mozambique Commodity Exchange. So she really brings a lot of statistical analysis, power, and brains to the project. Great. Next slide, please. So, as I said before, we really do have the dream team here. And to set the scene of the Gorongosa Project, I will basically say that Resilient Gorongosa, which is a global development alliance, has a vision of reducing threats to biodiversity, improving ecosystem services, and strengthening human well-being in the greater Gorongosa landscape. And this partnership between USAID, the Greg Carr Foundation, and the Gorongosa National Park began around 2008. In fact, Robert was also part of its inception. And since that time, Resilient Gorongosa being a phase 3, we have invested, USAID has invested $17 million into this partnership, which is leveraged one-to-one by the American innovator, philanthropist, and human rights advocate, Greg Carr. The prior 5-year award, called Integrated Gorongosa Buffer Zone Program, IGBZ, ended in February. And in April, our mission, USAID Mozambique, awarded the Resilient Gorongosa activity. This is a $20 million over 5-year cooperative agreement with the Gorongosa Project. And it is an integrated project. We have a case study you can find online that I think it was the Bridge folks pulled that together about 2 years ago. And our project is a blend of biodiversity, agriculture/food security, education, health, which includes family planning, nutrition, and mother-child health, as well as WASH programs. It also has a robust gender and resilience outcomes and indicators. And I believe that is about it on my intro. I'm trying to move this device. And yeah, so then just to say one last thing is that the Global Development Alliance is even more exciting now because the Gorongosa Project has established enterprises, which we've incorporated into the new activity, that are poised to generate sustainable finance in agriculture, ecotourism, media, and in the near future, forestry and even fisheries, where 100% of the profits are reinvested back into the Gorongosa Project. And with that, Meg, we can go to the next slide. Thank you.
Hi team. Can you hear me okay? This is Matt.
Yep.
Thanks, Nathan. So first, just thank you to Nathan for the great introduction. We sound very impressive, but I promise we are normal human beings. And I just want to say thanks to the other Nathan, Judy, Megan, and Lexine, who pulled everything together and been helping us to get organized the last couple of weeks. So here's a few words from former Justice Ginsburg to help us set our intention for today. Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So my goal today is to get you to join us and join our approach that we're doing in Gorongosa. So this first slide, as Nathan said, we're an integrated conservation landscape, and we do human development and conservation in a very complex environment in central Mozambique, where there's conflict, there's you know, most of those 200,000 people Nathan mentioned live under $2 a day. We're a national park. And so what we always lead with is our vision. And our vision is to create a world where people and the planet thrive together. And if we can do it in Gorongosa, I promise you we can do it anywhere in the world. Next slide. So now we've established our why. What is the how? In Gorongosa, we use about 5 different key ingredients, and that's thriving ecosystems. We use data-driven management, community capacity building, health and education services, and where Nayla and I fit in is under the sustainable economic opportunities. Next slide. So this is the very complex version of the theory of change. Next slide. This is how I think about it. There's basically 3 steps, which is we find that right mix of strategic interventions, and we've been doing this with local expertise, with on-the-ground experience, and with the best science and experts available internationally. We create this virtuous cycle within and adding values to people's lives, and then that will lead to this prosperity both for the people living around the park and the conservation goals we have. Next slide. So I really like this definition, and I encourage everyone to look up the Council for Smallholder Agricultural Finance. They're a great group, and they put this out. What is a virtuous value chain? In order for the virtuous value chain to take hold, trust must be created based on shared value, shared risk, a voice for each actor, and ownership of productive assets across the agricultural value chain. That really applies to even the conservation enterprises we're working on. And then to the right, what you see is us working transversally with quality control, capacity building, research and development, and then along each step of the supply chain, from creating the enabling conditions all the way to establishing a global recognized brand at scale. Next slide. And when you come, so there's okay, great. So here are 6 strategies that we use, and these really create the enabling conditions. These are that right mix of interventions we're looking at. Next slide. And then this is the step-by-step process where we question our assumptions and we make sure that the results change and the logical framework has some, we do some sense making around what are those key assumptions and how do they get us from, this intervention mix to a world of stewardship and prosperity. Next slide. And then finally, I just wanted to show this as bringing all those different pieces together, where we create the enabling conditions, we really engage with smallholder farmers, with different conservation enterprises, all along these value chains and supply chains, and then that results in the outcomes that we have, that we're targeting. I think I'll pass it to Nayla now.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you everyone for joining us. I just noticed that in my computer it takes 1 or 2 seconds later to see the new slides, so be patient, please. Here we present a picture of our amazing staff, people working in our processing factory for coffee, but we can go to the next slide. Here we bring to you a picture that describes perfectly what are the main problems that we are trying to fight. Because we work in an area with high levels of poverty and high levels of illiteracy, people tend to just open production fields that we call mashambas, and not obeying any conservation rules. So this is leading to a huge situation of deforestation and soil degradation. Next slide, please. Okay, so right now we support 3 main value chains, that is coffee, cashew, and honey. It's important to notice that we choose value chains that we can call it pro-conservation, or can support us in our goals, support us achieving our goals of reforestation and conservation of the environment. At the coffee value chain, we now have approximately 6,000 farmers engaged, and our target is to reach 1,000. At cashew, we have around 3,000 farmers involved, and we intend and we believe that we can reach 10,000 seeds. Coffee is produced only on the Mount Gorongosa, so the number of people living there is reduced. But about cashew, we produce cashew around the buffer zone, which comprises 4 to 6 districts. So we have a bigger scope to reach more farmers. And we also support the honey value chain, that we have around 150 beekeepers. Coffee and cashew, if you ask why, it's because it's cash crops that can also support us in reforestation. It's important to mention that the coffee that we produce is shade coffee. That means that we not only support farmers with seedlings of coffee, but we also support them with seedlings of native wood trees, because they need to have more or less 50% shade, 50% of light. So this also improves a lot the velocity of reforestation at Mount Gorongosa, that is the main rainforest in the region, the main source of water for the animals in the park and for the communities around the park. Cashew also, it's a very popular cash crop in Mozambique. It's one of the most organized agricultural value chain markets in the country, and it's kind of easier to get people involved in the cashew value chain and also contributing to reforestation. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we have agreements with the farmers engaged that we support. And it's important to mention that we support them in all production phase of the value chain, and then we place as the main market and the only market for them. We buy the coffee and we buy the cashew and the honey. And during the production phase, we support them with inputs and technical assistance. We have field technicians around the buffer zone and in the mountain. That means that for example, for the coffee program, we have around, we this year had our second harvesting. So the farmers started receiving their income from coffee sellings. And we also provide them with seeds for intercropping. So while they wait a year to be able to harvest the coffee or the cashew, they also are producing maize and beans for their own consumption and also to sell. So they perceive the benefits that we bring to them, economical benefits. And then we also take people from the community inside the park, because even though they may be born and grow up here, many of them never had the opportunity to go to the park and see the animals and understand what we are trying to do. So they start understanding the benefits, the economical benefits, and also the environmental benefits. And we sign agreements with them where they join and become our beneficiaries or participants. So through the agreements, we agree that they will only practice climate smart agriculture, and we have specific technicians for them. For that, we don't use any harmful pesticides or fertilizers during the production phase. We promote composting. We teach them intercropping, crop rotation, which is the job that our field technicians do on the field every day. They cannot cut trees. They cannot be involved in poaching. They have to avoid the most fires around. So what happens is that if any of the beneficiaries is found in practicing one of these harmful practices in the park or around the buffer zone, they risk losing the contracts with them. And since they start understanding the benefits that we bring, it's something that they do not want. So we start reaching the understanding, and we make the link between these livelihoods, income that they're having, with the conservation enterprises. I just wanted to add that we also have promoters, conservation promoters around the buffer zone. So it's a constant there is constant awareness talks happening daily in each visit to make them understand what is the link between the livelihoods, the incomes that they are receiving with the conservation goals that the park has. Can we go to the next slide? If you notice on the previous slides where I was talking about the value chains that we support, it is clear that we still have a considerable gender gap. We have to understand that this is a very difficult environment. Gender is a sensitive topic, even in urban areas. Imagine in rural areas and in places where people were never exposed to other realities. So it's difficult to have women able to be engaged in economic opportunities. It's culturally the man who has access to financial opportunities and economic opportunities. We are more successful with widow and single or abandoned women, but there are also married women that are also standing up for themselves and allowed to be involved in any economic opportunity. But for example, for beekeeping, it's the worst scenario because culturally, beekeeping is an activity that is only practiced by men in the area. So we had to find alternative solutions that we can support that will help us promote inclusivity, not only regarding gender, but also for youth people, so on and so forth. So a small assessment was made around the buffer zone, and we understood that fisheries, that pottery and any other artisanal work are activities that people are already developing in the buffer zone. So we are creating a program that we will be supporting the production of honey subproducts as lip balms, candles, and other honey subproducts. We are on the research and development phase right now. And then we also intend, and this is something that can get us women involved in the honey value chain and make them understand the benefits of the pollinators. We are also intending to support the fisheries, pottery, which would be very interesting to connect clay products like mugs with our coffee product that is very popular already. and any other artisanal work that we can produce with people from the community and give as souvenirs in our tourism shops. I think, can we go for the next slide, please? And we would like to bring here a little bit of our M&E approach. Until this month, we work at the output level with daily data collection. I told before that we have field technicians that visit smallholder farmers and beekeepers every day on the field to provide them with technical assistance. So when they provide these visits, extension services, they have to collect data of all activities that they are performing and on that visit. If it's harvest day, they have to fill all the information regarding the harvest. If they are applying fertilizers, whatever they're doing, they have to register the data for that. Currently, we have been doing that on paper, manually, and then we process all this information weekly, monthly, and then we produce the quarterly reports. From this main quarterly report, we then extract different information to then report to partners, donors, and so on and so forth. At the outcome level, we implement a biannual household survey. The first one was held in 2017, and the second one was in the 2019-2020 household survey, where we can see some kind of impact of the activities that we have been performing. On the 1st of August, we will initiate the development process of an electronic system that we call the Community Resilience Network. That is a system that will allow us to collect data daily automatically. It's a system that we can use offline, so allow us to collect data anywhere around the buffer zone, even if we don't have internet connection. And then we push the information to a database in the cloud. And it's not only a data collection format, but it's also a communication format that allows us, allow farmers to communicate between them, allow farmers to communicate with technicians, with supervisors, different groups interconnected with immediate communication. They will also be able to have access to important information like market information and weather information also. We also are able to, through the system, to upload technical information that can be used and demonstrated anywhere around the buffer zone. I'm talking about videos with technical demonstrations or motivation videos from, let's say, women farmers, women beekeepers, trying to motivate other women to be engaged, and that allows reduce the pressure that we have on technicians on the field. One of the main advantage of this system is that not only who has a specific mobile device can use, but anyone with an Android, with a phone with the Android system can also download the app and use it as a normal member of the network. This will allow us to also process information on time and take informed decisions with updated information. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think that's it for me, and I'll hand over to Matthew.
Thanks, Nayla. As you can see, we're working on a lot of different pieces, and as Nathan said in the chat box, we really begin with why, and we always come back to this. And the reason I say this is because over the last 6 years I've been there, we've encountered, we've had 3 years of pretty serious conflict, with the epicenter quite literally the heaviest fighting occurring right in all these areas we work. Even right now, there was attack last week. There was 2 attacks last week on our main road that comes in and out of the area. We've been hit with a class 5 cyclone Idai in 2019. We've seen, and then when you look at the communities, we've had, you know, the currency devaluation, the commodity market crash, and then the plague of, you know, full armyworm. And the thing that keeps us going is the why, because there, you know, at any of those given moments, we've had to change and adapt to the situations, and that's a piece of resiliency. But if we were just an organization that, for example, protected biodiversity, then when it comes to, you know, why we engage with, you know, young women in the buffer zone to do education, someone would be like, oh, why do you, like, that's not what you do. And I think our response is always, it's not what we do, it's why we do it. And I think that's the most important thing. And that's, you know, that's just a little bit of organizational, you know, just kind of how organizations really thrive. And then I'll do a couple more of these, and then Nayla will end us off at the end with the gender. So the second one is, how can you capture value for stakeholders? And we've got the enabling conditions where we work at the very input level, the training level, the, you know, creating these farmer groups, working on just all those enabling conditions that are required for success, those 6 strategies. Then we look at kind of adding value along the supply chain and value chain, where we're building production centers, processing centers. We're looking at research of new genetic material to, you know, adapt to climate change. And then we're trying to create a global market called, you know, our Gorongosa, where we're selling coffee in the UK, in the US, and we're trying to bring that impact story to global people, because it's a lot more than just something happening in Mozambique. This is a landscape that's, you know, a critical area for people, for biodiversity, and for a model. And then in terms of who makes the decisions, I think this is really important. If you've been following some, you know, interesting developments stemming from the Black Lives Matter movement and all sorts of, you know, sort of awakening of you know, and asking these really interesting questions, I think, you know, along our journey in Gorongosa, we've had a really good methodology, which includes, you know, private sector partnerships. We have this 25-year long-term agreement, so we're not subject to, you know, every 5 years having to make some crazy changes. We're trying to get this big why, and it's going to take 25 years to get there. And then we have this really detailed stakeholder buy-in, where we you know, Nayla and I, we write reports for, you know, the local, like from the district level to the community, it's called the Mfumu, the local leadership level, to the provincial, to the national, where the president's coming visiting, and then to getting international stakeholders. And that's kind of what this conversation is about. There's people on this call from Kenya and from Vietnam and everyone else. And then I think like my last bit is just, we've done this through serious support from USAID. They've been our longest partner and our most substantial partner, and that has really created the enabling conditions. And we didn't stop there, meaning we leveraged that financing to access debt capital to create some businesses that create revenue. We now have some revenue generation. We want to be self-generating revenue so that we're more sustainable. And I think that that's an exciting opportunity. So, you know, having that aspect, which is not always in the NGO kind of playbook, has been really exciting for you know, exciting opportunity. And then I'll leave it to Nayla to say the last few words here about something I think is one of the most important things we're doing.
Thank you, Matthew. As I said briefly on one of my previous slides, gender is it's a very sensitive topic, and in Mozambique, I think in many developing countries, gender and women empowerment is still a huge challenge. But culturally, there's a lot of cultural behavior and beliefs that prevent women to get linked to main economic opportunities and decision-making positions and so on and so forth. So we understood that if we wanted to reach not only parity, not only equality, but also to change people's mentalities about gender inclusivity and equity and equality, we also would have to try and make both men and women understand the benefits of both men and women having access to different opportunities. So as a strategy, we learned that it is necessary not only to implement gender inclusivity approaches to the buffer zone or to our participants or beneficiaries, the most common term, but we would also have to start within the organization. So inside, I would say there is a huge movement where we are promoting a very consistent gender strategy with clear recommendations on how we inside have to behave and see and understand gender, because we understood that people working in the Gorongosa Project are people from the community. So if we are trying to change the community behavior, we have to change our own behavior first, because we kind of reproduce what was seen in the communities around the buffer zone. So we are doing a huge work on gender awareness talk, education about gender, exercises about gender, and also making a clear effort to have more gender, more women working in specific areas, so that people can see that we are all capable of do any work as long as we have the physical and mental abilities, regardless of our gender. And then from the outside, we are working, we are focusing on the young ages, but adult people also. We are working strongly in involving men in this process, because we have to make them understand that we are not here to create rebellion, to change their cultural beliefs, but we also want them to understand the benefits of these movements. At the end of the day, the women that we work with, they are still dependent on the men, and the men that these women partners, they still have the last say on their lives. We don't want to go there and create another social problem that is more divorce and abandonment and more kids neglected and so on and so forth. So there is a huge integrated movement from within the organization to outside, and then also reproducing these beliefs outside. I think that's all I would have to say. I don't know if we can go to the next stage.
Well, thank you so much, Matt and Nayla. It was a really stimulating presentation, and we've gotten a lot of questions in the chat box. I was going to kick us off with one question, though, that because we focused on the enterprise approach in the presentation, we didn't talk so much about how you're working to measure and monitor the environmental impact and change from the restoration program at Gorongosa. Matt, can you talk a little bit, I'm sorry, about how you're monitoring the kind of the biodiversity work in Gorongosa? Or maybe that's a question for Nathan.
Great. I'll take this one if that's okay. So sure. The quick answer is there's several long-term monitoring things that are going on, including there's some like tree measurements. There's lots of satellite data using forest extent, forest loss. There's fire frequency happening. And then there's the kind of big metric, which isn't measured necessarily in sort of numerical only. For example, and that measure is the number of large animals that are at the park. And that's a bit of a, you have to be an ecologist to really understand what's happening, because you'll grow, like basically we're growing a bunch of animals. We're at 100,000 now, but success doesn't necessarily look like reaching 200,000, because you have a different set of biomass when you have, one buffalo versus 4 of some ungulate that's running around. So we have those sort of things. Then we have a host of really exciting research happening that adds to this body of knowledge for the park. So there's constant biodiversity surveys happening. We know more about the biodiversity in Gorongosa National Park than anywhere else on planet Earth, except for maybe one any other national park on the planet, except for I think the Great Smokies or something. They've been at it for like 60 years. We've been at it for like 10 years. So I think we'll catch up very quickly. There's about 7,000 species in the database that have been identified. Most vascular plants, all vertebrates and everything else. So it's really, and then there's a bunch of research happening from universities across the world, and all of that is added to what's happening. Then there's just to mention, because they're really on the front lines, is the conservation teams and the rangers, and the fact that we haven't had a lion snared in 2 years, whereas they were snared every 2 or 3 months in 4 or 5 years ago. We have the frequency of catching snares and all of the law enforcement activities. And I think that's a bit of a different, I think there's a lot more to say there. So I'll just pause.
Okay. No, I thanks for that. I just wanted to make sure that people got the full sense of the biodiversity monitoring that was going on there. Alistair McNeilage from the CARPE program in DRC has asked a question around, you mentioned a little bit about the nature of the conflict and attacks that are currently going on in the area. And his question is really about, does the presence of the park reduce conflict or attract conflict? So can you talk a little bit more about the nature of conflict there?
Neil, is it okay if I just talk on this one as well? Okay. So just I'll give one sentence or 2 sentences about the context. Gorongosa National Park has been the headquarters for an opposition party, and that opposition party has had bases and military presence there for the last 30 years or something like that. There was significant conflict during the war. Then there was a period of pretty good peace and stability, and then for lots of different complex socio-political reasons, the conflict started up again around 2013, 2012, and it's been going on now in different forms for about 5 years. So the big picture is the work we're doing in the park is really key to creating peace and stability. If we have jobs, people will be significantly less likely to pick up guns and continue fighting. And one way we've been instrumental in that process is to help facilitate the peace negotiation that happened between the opposition party and the government, culminating in the signing of a peace treaty last year in Gorongosa National Park. And it was recognized as this sort of peace park moment, and everyone agreed to set a path going forward. Now, again, as you in the DRC and everyone else in the world knows, these situations are incredibly complex and nuanced. And now you'll see that there's a second sort of spin-off opposition group that is not satisfied, and you also have the incoming presence of ISIS in northern Mozambique, and that's a very different conversation, not really related to us. So yeah, I would say that key to the success of peace and stability long term is jobs. And I think if there's somebody on here from Colombia, there's some really interesting work being done there, and I've been trying to follow some of the best practices coming out of there post the peace accords with the Civil War.
Great. I think we can help make those connections too, if you like. There's a suite of questions that are around the marketing of your products, and I know within our learning group, one of the activities that we hope to really embark upon this year is looking more at what we call intermediary organizations. So organizations a bit like yours, or the Northern Rangelands Trust in Kenya is another example. Himalaya Biotrade in Nepal. We have a couple of participants from Nepal today, so welcome you guys. How do you make those connections with an external market for some of your products? And within that context, how do you make sure that the community captures that revenue and not somebody else? If you could talk a little bit more about your marketing efforts, I think that would be of interest.
Thanks, Meg. And Nayla, maybe I'll take the first part and you take the second part.
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
So in order to make the connections, each value chain is significantly different. You know, they're all sort of commodities, and so they all have their own nuanced market drivers and market conditions. And you know, the road to market is unique and different amongst each one. And what we've found is a couple of fundamentals. One is looking for some kind of premium position. So either you're creating a causal brand or going through a causal relationship. Sometimes some people do this with certification or storytelling, and that really creates an attractive product that can then pull in a premium. If you're trying to fight the battle of the commodities, it's very difficult to lose without significant scale. And I would say scale is also a really key component, that you can't just have a boutique, you know, something that lives in one tourist shop or two tourist shops. If you really want to have impact, you have to think very large scale. You want hundreds of, you want hundreds or thousands or, you know, tens of thousands of farmers involved doing large scale production. And then the market itself is, we have found that there were a lot of people interested in these products, but they weren't able to do the legwork necessarily to get us to market. And so we just did the very basic step of creating a brand, and we sort of scratched around, used some really great you know, entrepreneurship type thinking, some startup thinking, found a global team who understands markets, and then we just created this value chain. And I think that was a call we made because we knew that we can command a much higher value outside, you know, through a branded product than if we're selling into a commodity market. But we do that also, so as a diversity. And just to say that the way we bring back from the market side that value is 100% of the profits from these enterprises come back into the Gorongosa Project. And that's what creates this sort of virtuous cycle. And then, yeah, maybe, I know, Nayla, you've been working hard on these contracts and trying to create this thing on the ground. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I'll
inclusive business model.
Okay, I'll just add a little bit. I think you kind of gave a high-level overview of how we work. I would just start by saying that I think in Mozambique, one of the biggest constraints that smallholder farmers face is market access. And by market access, I'm talking about fair and bigger enough markets. So one of the things that the Gorongosa Project brought is certain market. They produce and they know that they have a certain market that at the end of the season they will sell and will get a fair price for their product. Not to mention that throughout the whole production value chain, they have full support, technical support, and inputs during the production phase. So we are talking about around more or less almost 5,000 smallholder farmers involved in the three value chains. But we also have to think about the thousands of people that work as casual workers throughout the value chains, and the benefits that we bring in economical opportunities for auto employment in transport, local transporters, and many other services that local people are starting to develop and be service providers throughout the value chains. So I think that's a bigger part of the benefit that stays in the community, that is access to work, and also fair and big enough markets for the products that we are supporting. By buying the product and be the main exporter or then seller after value added, when, as Matthew was saying, 100% of the profit comes back to the communities. I will just mention two examples. For the coffee project, we support the Girls Clubs, which is another program that we have in another department, but that support girls to go to school and be in school, reducing early marriage. That is one of the biggest problems in the area. But we also have, for example, the tourist component, that 20% of the income on tourism go back to the communities, and then the community-based groups, community-based management groups then manage this profit, this income, and then they invest in the community in whatever they think the community needs. in various projects, in might be savings groups or whatever, how they want to invest. I think the key here on in our approach is the fact that we place as the main and certain market for farmers and everyone involved in the value chains.
Nayla, on that point, could you talk a little bit more about how people are organized? We had one question around if the farmers are involved in cooperatives, and you just mentioned some community-based organizations. It seems to me like you're dealing with lots of different types of community organizations. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, as Matthew said, each value chain has its own characteristics, so we cannot implement a one-size-fits-all solution. For example, we have a component that we call emergent farmers that they are not producing directly the coffee and cashew that we support, but they, for example, they produce vegetables. And in the vegetables value chain, they mostly work in groups. I would call them groups. I won't call them associations or cooperatives because they have specific characteristics, and this is something that they are not that formalized and organized. We are initiating an intervention right now that we are doing an assessment to see what is the best solution for each value chain. So for the vegetable farmers, they work in groups because mostly they need they have a joint block with different plots for each farmer. And because they need a lot of water, they need to be close to sources of water, and then it's easier to install irrigation systems. So for this value chain, they have groups, but let's say not formalized groups based on trust between them. They create their own groups with people that they are comfortable working with. For the coffee and cashew value chain, right now, farmers are working in their individual plots and we support them all individually, but we are heavily discussing what is the best approach, especially because of quality control and traceability. And then we will have to migrate to a system that we have one block with different plots, but that farmers can work in different groups also. I think in these two value chains, it's easier for us to create cooperatives because they are less risky, and we can control better the behavior, not the behavior, but the decisions that the cooperative will have to make, and facilitate access to financial opportunities that are things that we are also trying to bring, and mobile payments and a lot of development that we have in mind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. We have another question, which, I think the phrase imitation is the best form of flattery. Have you seen the government of Mozambique kind of replicate your model in any other national parks in Mozambique?
Maybe I'll just jump in here. Yes, significant. The Mozambican government, to their credit, has been extremely agile and excited for what's happening in Gorongosa. So so for example, the Nyasa National Reserve we've collaborated with them extensively, first on their management plan and then on some of the community integration approaches, and they've launched some pretty exciting stuff. And then the government also launched this thing called Mozbio, which is a biodiversity fund, like a fund that funds different projects throughout the conservation network in Mozambique. And that fund has basically stolen any good ideas we've had, and they're real experts there. They're sitting in the central offices and they're doing really good work. So those folks have the Gorongosa Project did this master's program. They're still doing it. It's within the park. It's for Mozambique. It's just one of the most beautiful things. And now the Mozbio is launching some similar types of trainings and organizations for skills building, capacity building of Mozambicans, and the list kind of goes on. And I I think that that is one thing that's really been impressive about Mozambique, is they definitely, in terms of conservation, they really have the right mindset. And the execution is sometimes challenging for lots of different reasons, but the mindset is definitely there.
Great. Andy, do you want to unmute yourself and maybe just make the point that you just put in the chat box verbally? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, yes, I can. I just lost my window for a second. I just wanted to, this is a great conversation, and very nice to hear from you, Matt and Neela. Just wanted to make the point that Netra was asking, is USAID willing to continue these and continue to consider these kinds of long-term investments? And I think that we do. I don't think we ever go into them thinking they're going to last 15 years or maybe 20 years. But when we see progress and impact, like in Gorongosa, and in Gorongosa, there's also, not just the impact of what they intended, but the resilience that we are seeing in the face of all these major challenges. It is definitely attracting attention, and something that I would say a lot of missions are looking for partnerships like this. And I just also pointed out in the chat that Gorongosa inspired partially an opportunity that is still open, actually, to develop integrated private sector oriented partnerships in any place where USAID is working, to basically take a cross-sectoral approach to development that also achieves conservation outcomes. So anyway, if you want more information on that, feel free to contact me. We have plenty of interest. I'm not trying to sell it. Just wanted to give a shout out while some Gorongosa folks are on the line that we are also borrowing your ideas.
Good to hear from you, Andy. What a pleasure, man.
Matt, you started off the presentation talking about the why, kind of like the vision, and kind of I think the one point we haven't touched on enough in trying to work on some of these long-term, 10, 15-year type programs is that having that leadership in that vision from the community. And with Neela in particular, I would love to hear from you more about how you and your program are really building that local leadership and vision, and kind of what are some of the challenges that you've seen working in this place for so long in building that ownership and vision.
Neela, should I just give 2 seconds and then you can jump in with some comments?
Yes,
Yeah, so, just as an anecdote, the first 5 years, I think we've gone through 3 or 4 governors now. There was a governor, and I won't mention their name, but they intrinsically did not like national parks. They wanted them all abolished. So for like 5 years of their tenure, the Gorongosa National Park was, like, at a provincial level anyway, under serious political distress. So, that kind of local, now that's a kind of different level of leadership, but just to say that, these sort of political conditions surrounding Gorongosa National Park have been up and down in many different ways. Nationally, it's always been very positive, and that's great. But locally, there's been, it's quite dynamic, and it's quite heterogeneous, meaning in one district, there's communities, there's leadership there who really are not excited, like, they fundamentally have a different set of values, and not to be cynical, but to be realistic, that a lot of them are associated with criminal activities. So as the park becomes a strong foundational institution that supports transparent jobs and really good stuff like this, all the people hiding in the shadows are being exposed. And, you know, we in our country and many other countries have histories of organized crime, and it's very insidious and it's very challenging to outroot. So we have those kind of challenges in some ways. And then I'll just end with the one of the most exciting things is the opposite is true, that we also get incredible leaders. So there's a guy called Sabet who works in Villa Gorongosa. He is a self-made man. You know, he started as a simple farmer. There's nothing simple about farming, but you know, he started as a, you know, a very basic level of farming, and has built himself up through ingenuity and just a quick mind, as, you know, a very successful man. Now he's the mayor of the city. And he's creating a program, you know, he's working with us in USAID. We're going to be doing this resilience agriculture, building a model city, and he's driving that. His instincts and his intuitions are driving a lot of that. Now, you know, we as the park, we're helping to, you know, foster some of his own, you know, ambitions for creating a city where his people are thriving. They have green spaces, they have, you know, access to clean water, the schools are functioning. And it's not only this base level of like, okay, we're all surviving, you know, we're all not malnutrition. I think we all are thinking much bigger. You know, people want to thrive. And I think that is part of our vision. And this guy, you know, this mayor, Sabet, he has the same idea. He wants his people to be, you know, living their best life, you know, having opportunities, sending their kids to good schools, you know, enjoying life. And so we've fostered that. And then I could just give a million small examples about local leadership where, you know, we've identified people who really are you know, early adopters of some of these things. They see it and they see the opportunity and they just go for it. And what we've done the best at is trying to open doors and trying to create skills building. So, you know, trying to find opportunities to do skills transfer, capacity building of the institutions. So that's from my side. I don't know, Nayla, do you have some more to kind of add there?
Thank you, Matthew. I'll just add that one of the, I think Matthew talked about local authorities, but in a bit higher level. But one of the good strategies that we learned is that I think in any, at least in Mozambique, I would speak only from my experience in Mozambique, if you really want to engage community, you have to first conquer the local leaders. And by local, we talk about the very basic, at the bottom of the power chain in the country, you have the Mfumus, you have the Sapandas, you have the traditional leaders that are people who are really mind changers in the community. If they align with you, most probably the community will be. If they're not, you'll have some challenges to make people understand your vision, engage, and give you a chance to show them the benefits that you're trying to bring to local communities. So we have a very good relationship with local leaders at that level, at the community level, and we make them understand what we are doing. We make them understand the benefits, and they also over time, because most necessarily what you need is them to be open to give it a chance, and then they start understanding. Because let's see, people open production fields or mashambas to produce in a sustainable way, because they need to produce and sell things and have small money, but they don't understand that they are destroying the soil in the long run. They don't understand that they're cutting trees and then all these concerns for the next generations. But if you make them also gain money and then do it in a sustainable way, you just need them to be open to see a different way to do and to do things. So we really need the local leaders to be on our side or understand our vision and open the door. And then we try and they see the benefits and they all start engaging more and more. But we also have a program that's called community-based natural resource management groups. It's local leaders that they identify in the community, people that they respect, influential people, that create a group that help, for example, manage the income that comes from the tourism, and then other projects in the community. So this is how we interact directly with local leaders, and we try to work together. Even this trimester, we received, I think, 3 visits from local Mfumus and some pandas for them to come and see how is the coffee process, because they just see the coffee in the tree and then they know what happens with that. But when we bring them in and they see and they taste it and they start understanding what we're doing.
Thank you so much for that, Nayla. I think that's a great point to end on, is that we need to continually build that leadership on the ground, and we will never get to any kind of successful biodiversity conservation without working with those people. On behalf of all of the participants today, please let me extend my great thanks to Matt and Nayla for joining us today. Thank you, Nathan, for your ongoing work to support these programs. I just, I think we had great participation today, and we're a couple of minutes over. On our last slide here, I did want to just point out the Conservation Enterprise Learning Group site for everyone. If there are other people in your missions who you think would be interested in joining our Google list, please let me know, and I'm happy to subscribe them, sign them up. We just posted a brand new product called the Conservation Enterprise Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Framework, which was a result of our meeting last June at the Environment Officers Conference. Hope to be talking with everyone about that a lot more. And thanks also to everyone who has answered our question in our survey form. The link is in the box there. So other than that, it's just thank you, Matt and Nayla, for this opportunity. And I think you see lots of thanks coming into the chat box as well. So thanks, everybody, and have a great week.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.